Today we're talking about settings for all of these cameras on a wedding day, and at the end of this video I actually get into why I don't use back button focus. If you're a Patreon member right now, there is a course going up. Book More Weddings 2020 is being released if you're a Patreon member, which is $30 if you sign up right now. You get access to Book More Weddings 2020, and when that course comes out, it's actually going to be $299. So by signing up for Patreon for one single month that you can cancel at any time, you actually get a $299 course. So you're saving $269 and 0 cents.
Taylor Jackson.
Shooting 67 weddings last year.
Taylor Jackson, welcome.
So Taylor, you are well known in this community. You're an amazing photographer.
Welcome to the kitchen. Lindsay's at the studio today. She has an intern for a little bit, so they're doing stuff over there. I figured I'm gonna be talking to a camera, and I can't do that in front of other people, so I'm gonna do that in the kitchen here with my porg mug. This is what happens when you make a film based on making characters to sell merch. You get these, and then they can't sell them, so they give them away to people on the internet, and you win draws for things that you never entered. So that's the story of the porg mug. I hope you enjoyed. Today I'm gonna run you through all the settings that I use for wedding photography. This is kind of the behind the scenes, like the actual camera settings. If you wanna see the actual numbers, shutter speeds, f-stops, whatever, I have a lot of full wedding day videos. The newer ones will all have all of the settings actually on the image. Actually, maybe I'll address that first. So I'm gonna address that first, and then I'm going to talk more about the actual camera settings. So my strategy going into a wedding day, I really do abuse shallow depth of field. I am totally happy to do that. I feel like it gives a good separation. It is an easy way to create an image that feels more professional pretty much in every circumstance. I use the Nikon G lenses. This is the Nikon Z6. I use different lenses than that sometimes. But the main lenses that I'm using are the Nikon G lenses. So I use the 24-1.4G, 35-1.4G, and the 85-1.4G. And typically the 85 is on my main camera, which is my Nikon D850, and my backup camera, which is typically a Nikon D750. Maybe replaced. There's rumors of new stuff coming out. I don't know. Hopefully they make a 24 megapixel body that's this, but the D850 is just smaller. I don't know, I don't work for Nikon. I tried one time. Hi, I'm Taylor, and I'm auditioning to become a Nikon ambassador. Here are some stances that you can use with your Nikon camera. The dad. The lunge. The David Hasselhoff. The Michael Phelps. But it didn't really work out. Maybe it's that I have a Canon strap on my camera. Getting back to the settings. So I shoot everything pretty much wide open until I'm given a reason not to. If you are watching my full wedding day videos, you will notice this. It is not a surprise to you, hopefully. I do this because I really like the look of it overall. And I like the fact that if I walk into a getting ready room, that I can just kind of hide everything, at least out of focus, that I don't want to be there, rather than actually coming in and having to style the entire room, because that's not fun for anyone. So that's kind of my workaround for wedding days, hiding people in the background, hiding people at ceremonies that, like, there's always that one person that's out of focus that's looking at the camera, and if you were to shoot it with something like a 24-70, they're gonna be a lot more sharper and a lot more distracting in the frame. So I like that. I like to focus on my subject. I feel like it is an easy way to simplify the wedding day. I'll speak to this. We're sorry for the tangents. Hopefully these are valuable tangents. I personally like to shoot primes because every frame individually has a reason that if you're shooting a 24 on one body and an 85 on the other body, that things are either wide, or even the 35, things are either a wide shot or they're more of a telephoto close-up. And everything has pop, everything looks good in the gallery, everything goes together well because it's the same camera system, same kind of rough lenses, even though they're different lenses, same glass. Everything fits together super well, but everything has a purpose. I find that while this, if you have a Nikon Z6 and you were on the fence with getting the 24-70 2.8 because it's wildly expensive and more expensive than the f4 that probably came with your camera, this is probably my favorite Nikon lens. Probably the best. I'm gonna say it's probably the best Nikon lens technically and optically and usefulness wise that has ever existed, that when you go out in the world, if you're a travel photographer, this should be like, this is the kit. This is like probably the best kit you can buy right now. The thing that I love the most about them is that there is an artistic flair to everything, that it is something that I have not seen from any other camera manufacturer, the way that colors and contrasts and things just kind of render together. Technically, at 1.4, they're not the most technically correct lenses in the world, but I like that. I like that soft vignette. I like the way the focus falls off. I like the colors that come out of it. I like everything about those lenses. So I would say that I am a Nikon shooter primarily because of the glass, specifically those lenses. And then I'm now super interested with the tech that they put into this. However, this goes into maybe their 1.4 version or 1.2 version of the lenses that they're gonna be building for this mirrorless body. If they can take this and put that into a prime, like an 85 prime, I'm super excited, and I will spend a lot of money to have that lens, because that would be an out of the ballpark lens. So we'll see in the future. My setup for my actual camera is pretty simple. I get a new camera out of the box. Regardless of what one of these cameras it is, they all pretty much have the same settings. For specifically the Nikon D850, it's a 40 plus megapixel body, so I set it to medium raw, which is great. It's also the name of Anthony Bourdain's book. But even if it wasn't, I would still shoot medium raw. I don't have a reason, I don't think anyone really has a reason to shoot more than 40 megapixels on a wedding day. You just create so much data, and it's never going to be used. I think 24 megapixels is kind of the sweet spot for wedding day coverage, that can print like really anything that you could ever imagine. American Idol purchased a print from me from an old point and shoot camera, 3.2 megapixels. This was back in like 2006, 2007. And they bought an image from a point and shoot camera, and they put it up on a full-size billboard in Times Square and a full-size billboard in LA. So if that speaks to what a 3.2 megapixel camera can do, that you can print, I know viewing distance and whatnot, but you can get good print sizes and good quality of print out of not having 45 megapixel files. If you're somebody that just wants to shoot everything and crop it and post later, that doesn't sound like fun, and that sounds like a bit of a nightmare in post-production. So when I get my camera, medium raw for this guy, these two are 24, so those are totally cool. I go into the settings and I set it to raw plus JPEG, so I shoot usually normal JPEG because it's totally fine. I shoot to both cards, so everything is being shot to both cards so that I have instant backup. That's another tip that I would have as your main camera body. Get something like a D850 or a D750 that has 2 card slots. The Nikon Z6 is amazing, but I would be hesitant. I've never had an XQD card fail, but I can't put that into a main camera and like go out in the world, and I don't know. It's a lot of risk, and I'm pretty risk adverse when it comes to weddings. I back everything up a lot. These are, I would say, usually my main kit: 85, 35, Nikon D850, Nikon D750. So raw plus JPEG. JPEGs, when I get home, I back them all up online. Canada has weird data constraints and speeds, so I can't really realistically back up all of my full res raw files at the end of the wedding day. If you have access and ability to do that quickly, by all means do that. I also build a smart preview catalog and send it off to my editor, so that's everything. They call through it and do everything in Lightroom. And that's kind of another offsite raw backup. I think the smart previews are maybe like 5 megapixels, somewhere like 4 to 6 megapixels. So worst case, you still have the files, again, offsite somewhere else, as well as your JPEGs backed up, as well as on 2 hard drives and your cards. And then my extra step is if I'm traveling somewhere, I'll put everything on another hard drive to physically bring with me, or I'll bring the cards with me and the camera, depending on the trip. So that's my levels of backup, which is maybe too extreme for some, but I am happy to say that I've never had any issues, and I've been doing weddings for almost 15 years now. So next up, I shoot autofocus continuous pretty much all day. So how I set that up is in the settings, and you can also hold down the button here and kind of scroll through. So back wheel goes through AFC. The point will track back and forth. I use the smallest little dot point possible, and I put it on whoever I'm taking a photo. It's like on their eye, and I'm tracking them around with this back stick while they move. You'll also see me in the full wedding days focused and recomposing. I'm kind of doing that as I'm moving the point over to kind of reach them. And I don't use eye autofocus or face detect or anything that like I could easily use on this, simply because I want to immediately be able to override anything that the camera thinks is a good idea in those once in a lifetime moments. I want to have full control over everything I'm doing, so that I can just, whatever situation is happening, I want to be in control of it. The only other time that I'll use AFS, which is autofocus synchro kind of one shot, is during dancing. If my camera realistically shouldn't be autofocusing on anything, I'll be kind of shooting a focus point out in the dance floor and then waiting for them to kind of be back in there and moving back and forth with them. You can also try AFC if there's enough light, but if you're in darkness and you're trying to shoot ambient, which I do from time to time, AFS is your friend, and you can also use your little flash beacon on your camera as well if that helps out. But I try to avoid that. I feel like my strategy for going into wedding days is to have as little impact on the actual wedding day as possible, to be there to document it. And I don't like to have the red beacon out on people's faces all the time, because I feel like it's a little intrusive, and I'll use it if I have to, but if I can get away with not using it, I would much prefer that. Moving into the next setting, I put all my cameras on manual. So on the wheel here, you can set your camera to manual. There's mode button here, and then little wheel here as well. So everything goes on manual. On digital SLR, there's a bit of a learning curve for shooting manual. The main reason that I do it is because it really speeds up your post-production when you get home. and everything is just perfectly like the same, that you can make one edit to one family photo and sync it across every other family photo and you're done. Whereas if you're shooting aperture priority, everything's gonna be like plus or minus maybe like 0.3 of a stop, and it's gonna be a bit of a pain to correct for that. I would say I can easily process a wedding maybe in 2 hours or less. It's like 4,000 image wedding culled down to maybe 700, 800 images, and then completely processed in Lightroom. After that, I use Photo Mechanic to cull, and then I use Lightroom to edit everything else. I would say 2 hours is totally acceptable for that, and that is simply because I shoot manual and I do my best to get everything as right in camera as I can. With digital SLRs, what you're seeing through the viewfinder isn't actually the image you're taking, so I take test frames, unfortunately. If you are using something like this mirrorless Z6, it is a lot easier to just see exactly what you're getting. I was always a little bit envious of my friends that shot video because like they just turn their camera on manual and everything they're seeing here is exactly what they're getting, and I was feeling that gap. But now with cameras like this, like everything you see through the viewfinder, with the exception of maybe like slower exposures and flash, is exactly what you're gonna be getting in the camera. So you don't really have to verify things. You don't have to do test frames. You're just kind of good to go. That is one of the main benefits of this camera here. But digital SLRs are kind of my go-to still for wedding days. And that doesn't mean that you have to also go with that. You can go with whatever your heart desires. This is what I'm doing. This is what I've been doing for a long time, and I'm super happy with it. I put all my cameras into continuous low mode. You'll notice on my full wedding day videos that I'm always like, every time I hit the shutter, I don't hold it down and take multiple frames. But shooting CL, if I don't come up all the way, it'll still take another frame when I go back down on the button. Whereas if I'm just shooting single shot, it's cumbersome and kind of annoying. So CL, because I'm never really shooting anything that requires the amount of frames per second any of these cameras can do, really. And the way you set that on here on a D850 is this back wheel, CL. And the way you set it on here is the exact same. And on a Nikon Z6, the back button here that has a little frames button. So yeah, that's pretty much how I set up my cameras. The only other thing that I do is maybe out of scope if you're only doing photography coverage, but I set everything to, in video mode, to 60 frames a second. I like to slow motion everything because I feel like you can experience the moments a little bit better. So I shoot all my videos in slow motion, and even pretty much everything we ever shoot, we just shoot it in 60. I don't feel like there's anything wrong with that, that you're not gonna be creating like footage that is unusable if you decide to do a timeline at 24 and deliver regular speed footage. I also don't necessarily believe in the 180 rule, that your shutter has to be at 1/80th of a second. You don't need NDs if you're shooting slow motion, that you can kind of frame blur out in post, in a little plugin in post if you want, because on the wedding day, if you're shooting photo video coverage, there's no time to be putting ND filters on to try to get your shutter speed down to 1/80th if you're outside and you want to be shooting wide open. The last feature I'm going to talk about is one of my favorite features, and basically what I did was I set this front function button here, or front function button here, or one of these buttons here, to change into DX mode, crop mode, from full frame. So for these lenses, usually I would leave them kind of full, but if I'm shooting my 7200 and I am at a ceremony and I find that 200 just like isn't far enough, that I can quickly just switch into crop mode. Like that's as fast as it is. I'm sure you've probably actually seen it on some of the full wedding day videos, that I can instantly be at 300 millimeters and like a little bit closer. And with that jump, if you're shooting medium raw, you are getting a less megapixel file, but for the most part, I've never seen anybody print candid documentary photos of their wedding ceremony anything larger than like 8 feet, which I feel like a 10 megapixel file would still do pretty good at. So I don't mind shooting a lower file size to just like kind of have the extra reach, and it's a trade, but I don't think it's a negative trade by any means. I was totally happy shooting my Nikon D750, which is one of Nikon's, or at the time it was the best camera that existed for a long time for wedding photographers, and that was 16 megapixel camera, and I was totally happy with that. And 24 is great now, but I see no reason to be shooting like 45, anything above that. So those are my settings. Check out the full wedding day videos if you're interested in seeing the actual like numbered settings on all my cameras in all situations. You can just scroll through them all if you're interested in seeing golden hour settings. You can just go to that part of every wedding day and just check it out. And hopefully that's helpful, and hopefully this was good. I'm gonna go back to drinking from my porg mug. Also, if you're watching this in the month of December 2019, in Patreon right now is the Book More Weddings 2020 course. It's coming up for Patreon members for your $30 a month fee if you're signed up. So you can just go sign up right now and pay $30, and you can get access to Book More Weddings 2020, which is my huge flagship course that's gonna be coming out officially in January, and it's gonna be $299. So you're saving like, I don't know what the math is, a lot, saving a lot, like $260 $269 to just sign up for Patreon and get that content for the month rather than purchasing it later. So head over there. That might be the greatest deal. I just kind of figured out the math on that, and that sounds like a pretty good deal. So head over there if you're interested. Month of December, and then January we're going to get to full hybrid coverage, a course on Patreon as well. So lots worth sticking around for. But you can join. You can leave at any time. There's full money back guarantee if you are upset with Patreon that there's not enough content in the 100 plus, maybe even more, 200 videos now that are already up there, and my presets and everything that you get instant access to. Send me an email and I will send you your money back. I apologize, I've discovered a few more things that I should mention. So for my actual metering mode, I'm always just kind of on full matrix metering mode, but again, I'm shooting manual, so I'm doing test frames on this guy, and this is just exactly what I'm seeing, so that doesn't really matter. It makes it pretty easy. And another thing that I do is I go into my picture profile and I actually just set to standard. It only really affects the JPEG, so I'm not too worried about making that like the most ideal JPEG ever, because it is, for the most part, simply for backup. So I'm not too stressed out about that. And the last thing that I'm gonna end on, which is something that does come up a lot. It's I hate when people are like, a lot of people ask me, but a lot of people do ask me about this, so this is about it. Nobody else asks me anything else. Back button focus, I do the opposite of back button focus. So my shutter is my focus, so half press, in focus, full press, takes the photo. Or if you're in continuous, full press also is kind of tracking with everything. I use the autofocus on button. I set it to be the opposite, so I set it to be an actual AF lock. So when I see something that I want and I want to hold my focus point there, I just hold on this button. I found that organically a little bit easier in the beginning. I don't shoot anything that's like sports or like crazy fast motion. So this was just a little bit easier for me. And I feel like the old D700 used to give that as an AF AE lock, so maybe that's where my habit came from. I basically just do the opposite thing that back button focus would do. I don't think there's a right or a wrong way necessarily, especially with new cameras and autofocus tech, that if you are photographing something that moves at high speeds, you can be relying a lot more on the actual autofocus in the camera body to make that happen. When I'm in full control of everything, I don't see a need for back button focus. So just simpler and easier to learn, I think, if you're shooting with just the button as your focus activator. I'm gonna go check the D700 and see if that information is accurate. So this here is my Nikon D700 that has over, I think, 1.3 million shutter clicks. Original shutter somehow, hot glued together down here. I dropped it and broke it. The flash got spin kicked off at a punk show one time, and the battery door doesn't recognize anymore. If you put the battery in it, it doesn't work. So you have to use the battery grip for it. But other than that, works like a charm. And on the back here, you can see that there is the AF button as well as the lock button. So right beside it, in what I feel to be kind of a more organic place, is actually the AE lock, AF lock. So I just got used to using that, and I brought that over to these camera bodies here, where they just stripped it away and went to AF on. But I actually like that button back. Nikon, if you're listening, I miss having this. I miss having two buttons that I can program to do stuff right there that are in that like perfect spot that maybe someday. That's for real all for today's video.